Yo guys, Superior David here. March of the Lich King is about to release, or maybe it has already released depending on when you're watching this video, which means it's time for me to give you decks that you can play day one of the expansion. Now, normally on the channel, I give you guys like 10 decks that you can play day one, but because of the addition of the new Death Knight class, you will be getting 11 decks this time around, one for every class. So I hope you enjoy these decks, and if you do, make sure to hit that like button. Also, subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. I'm going to be uploading just a ton of gameplay and deck footage just over the next couple weeks, so definitely don't want to miss out on that and all the spicy superior decks out there. But anyways, without further ado, let's get into these decks. Now we'll be starting things off with, of course, the new class Death Knight, and I have for you today a triple Frost Rune Death Knight deck, which was looking really strong in theory crafting. Definitely one of the best Death Knight decks in my opinion. Now the idea behind this deck is that we are a burn deck. Essentially, every game you just want to blast your opponent down in the face with our powerful frost damage dealing spells, and boy, these spells are just ridiculous. All of the frost damage dealing spells at Death Knight's disposal just do so much relative to their mana cost, particularly the Glacial Advance, because it's a lot of damage face and it can also just give you decent mana cheating. And speaking of mana cheating, this deck has just a ton of it, with like the Horn of Winter being able to just refresh your mana crystals, the Rhymefang Sword allowing you to just get that like incremental mana discount on spells, then of course the Nerubian Vizier, which can discover you a spell and then it becomes discounted. And like all of this mana cheating and damage becomes scarier due to cards like Lady Death Whisper as well as the Queen Ajara. It's just very scary to go up against this deck because you're never sure like what spells your opponent has and like how much mana they're paying for them, so you're just always afraid of dying. So Frost Death Knight looking just really powerful out of the gates, and I wouldn't be surprised to see this deck everywhere on day one of the expansion, so definitely want to familiarize yourself with this list. But I don't think it's the only powerful burn style of deck we'll be getting in the March of the Lich King expansion, as evident by this next deck, and that would be Shock Spitter Hunter. Now the idea behind this deck is that you want to equip Rexxar with a weapon ASAP and start swinging that thing, preferably in the face, so you can start ramping up the damage on the new Shock Spitter minion. And then once you get enough damage ramped up, you just send it face and boom, your opponent's gone. And then so we can get even like more damage in with the Shock Spitters, we got the Selective Breeder, so we can just get more copies of these guys. And then also the Brand Bronzebeard, so we could double up on the Battle Cry. And then like the cherry on top, I have to say, is definitely the Devouring Swarm, just so you can like play like Shock Spitter with the Brand, and then you play like Devouring Swarm to kill them off and do it all over again. It's filthy. Then to back this all up, we have the Arcane package that Hunter's getting in the new expansion, and the Ricochet Shot, the Conjured Arrow, and the Eversong Portal. Really nice cards, especially since we got the Talented Arcanist to get even like more spell damage on them, and then also the Twin Bow Terracoil to just double up on those spells. Now overall, I just gotta say, I was just like so pleasantly surprised by this deck in theory crafting. Very consistent at what it does, and that is just blasting people in the face with damage. And if you love blasting people in the face with damage, then you are going to love this next deck, and that would be this Arcane Quest Mage. And I swear, like, this is like the last burn burst style of deck I have for you today. Now basically Blizzard is pushing like this Arcane Bolt package with Mage, and the Arcane Bolts are like these 1 mana spells that deal 2 damage, and then they Mana Thirst 8, which means like when you have 8 mana crystals, they deal 3 damage instead. And so like we have a lot of cards that can give us more of these Arcane Bolts, and I figured like the best way to sort of just utilize these would be in Quest Mage, because not only are these arcane spells that help you advance your quest, but once you complete that quest, then you get access to like all this spell damage, and I feel like that's just like the best way to sort of utilize these bolts, especially since we've got the new Magister's Apprentice, which can just make all these 1 mana arcane bolts just free, because it's basically Sorcerer's Apprentice for only arcane spells. And this card seems mighty good, especially when you can combo it with the new Vexilus Legendary, who doubles up all of your arcane spells. Overall, I'm very scared for the return of Quest Mage. I feel like this was such an oppressive deck back in its heyday, and I think with the addition of like these very cheap arcane bolts, Quest Mage can potentially get out of hand very fast, so definitely want to keep this one on your radar. Now next up I have for you a Concoction Miracle Rogue, which I think this is probably one of the most fun decks I played in theory crafting. All the new concoction cards that Rogue's getting are just a blast. I'll show a picture of all of them over here so you can see like what the concoctions do, but basically we have a bunch of cards that add concoctions to our hand, and when you get 2 concoctions, they mix together and you get like both effects for the same mana cost, and that's pretty good. And I feel like this concoction package is so versatile, but I think it fits very nicely in Miracle Rogue, just because of like cards like the Ghoulish Alchemist allowing us to like make our concoctions like cost 0, which is very disgusting in like a Draka pop-off turn or like a Sinstone Graveyard pop-off turn. Very powerful there. And speaking of power, I feel like Potion Master Putricide is one of the best cards we are getting in the new expansion. He is so freaking powerful. His ability triggers on every minion dying, not just your own, and this gives Miracle Rogue access to just like so much more value. So the deck can still just have these incredible pop-off turns with like the Draka or the Sinstone Graveyard, of course, but you're not like as reliant on that. I feel like, Miracle Rogue already good. But these concoctions, I think, just like really just take it to the next level and make it like a bit of a more flexible deck that can really, like, even if you can like disrupt it in some way, you can gas back up very easily with Putricide, who can, draw you more cards into your next bomb or whatever. So I don't know, the concoctions just very well, probably like an all rogue decks, but I think they're just busted in Miracle Rogue. And speaking of busted, I have for you definitely one of my most broken decks I played in Theory Crafting, and that is this like Armor Celestial Alignment Druid. Now, the idea behind this deck is that we are Celestial Alignment Druid, and we basically sort of make use of the new Anubricon Legendary to do even more broken things, which I never thought would be possible, but here we are. And like Anubricon, I think a lot of people were like, oh, would it really be that good? But I'm here to tell you, it's actually filthy in this deck, not because of, public enemy number one, Sire D. While he is very good with like Sire D and Brand, especially after alignment, I think where the Anubricon really shines is with the Astalor. So Astalor is this new legendary where like every time you play him, you get like a bigger version that does something cooler, and it culminates with him being able to like just get a bunch of damage at your opponent. So the idea here is after you play alignment and you play Anubricon, you can play Astalor and then all of his forms in the same turn. And you can even get like additional copies of Astalor's later forms if you can like combo off with him like alongside a Brand. Armor is really just like your limiting resource when you're comboing off here, which is why we run like the Chitness Plating, which I think is probably like the best armor gaining card that Druid's getting. It's really good like early on when you haven't played alignment, so you can like cheat out the new Crypt Keeper, which is like very nice anti-aggro. And then we've also got like the Underking, which, Battlecry, Death Rattle gain you some armor. So, you can play him when you're popping off to gain some more armor. If you play him like with alignment, he's going to cost 1, so you'll like net some armor there. So just so crazy what you can do with Druid now. Like if you thought Druid was busted before, just like wait until you see like people start refining this list when the new expansion drops. I guarantee it's going to just be disgusting. But if you want to farm those Druids day one, then I've got a deck for you, and that would be Aggro Shadow Priest. Oh my goodness, I played against this deck so much in Theory Crafting, and it is so filthy aggressive. Like it could put on so much pressure early on with bombs like Incorporeal Corporal and Shadowed Spirit and the Haunting Nightmare. I feel like these 3 cards are really good in this deck because of the new Undying Ally. You play the Undying Allies and then you drop either of these cards down, and then they have Reborn. And that's just so annoying when you're playing against a Shadow Priest, because basically like every minion that stays on the board becomes so much more threatening because of cards like, Void Touch Attendant. But in addition to that, if your opponent does happen to clear off any of these minions, you don't even really care that much because of the new Animate Dead, because you'll just get them right back. This deck also gets a lot of benefits when our undead minions die because of like, grave digging. It allows us to just draw through our deck. And then we've also got the Shadow Ward Unearth. But I think the real nail in the coffin is going to be the High Cultist Basilisk. This card, I wasn't sure if it was going to be so good, but it got played against me a couple times in Theory Crafting. Actually just so frustrating. I feel like people were like pretty mixed on the the priest revive undead stuff when it was revealed, and after like getting the chance to play with it, it feels just actually really disgusting. And I think that Shadow Priest is going to just be a very dominant force in the meta to come. Now moving right along to Paladin, I have for you today a Control Dragon Kazakis Paladin. And I know we've seen these kinds of decks in Hearthstone before, but I feel like Paladin's just getting so many better dragons in the March of the Lich King expansion that I feel like it's going to actually be viable this time around. I'd say mainly like the new Daring Drake as well as the Time Warden just give you like a lot more like mid-game presence and pressure, like being able to get some tempo in and potentially just gunking up the board with like Divine Shields and Taunts. Very powerful stuff. And then we've got the granddaddy coolest dragon of them all, the new Anachronus, which this card is just sweet. You slam this card down on 7 and it just nets you just so much tempo because like everything else just disappears for 2 turns. So this gives you like the space to like, maybe get down a Cariel or maybe like just dig for like your Equality and City Tax to clear off a board. Just what a cool card. And sometimes you're just like, hey, my opponent doesn't have any things on the board anymore. Maybe I just go face and win the game before their stuff comes back. Just so freaking cool. But if that's not good enough, we also got the new Astalor, which I feel like is just like a nice backup win condition in case, like Theatar is still good in the new expansion, or maybe like Patchwork eats our Kazakhstan or whatever. I feel like just having this redundancy with the Astalor is going to be nice. So I guess all in all, if you're like itching to play some Control Paladin, but you're just like sick of Sire D and the Jailer, then I think this is going to be the deck for you. Now, moving on to Warlock, I have for you like a Death Rattle Discard Zoo Warlock, which I don't know if it's going to be better than Imp Warlock, but I think this deck's going to be just a load of fun. Basically, we want to, sort of just curve out in the early game with our Death Rattles and then use cards like, basically like the Shallow Grave to just kill those Death Rattles off, especially when we have the Devourer Souls down so we can just get more value from those Death Rattles. Just really funny things you could do there. And then moving into the mid game, we want to start like discarding cards with like the Scourge Supplies or like these Savage Ymir Jar, which I know I'm horribly mispronouncing, but we want to, just play our discard cards because we have some decent discard payoffs now. The Soul Barrage, overcosted damage, but I feel like we have more ways to discard cards now, so it's gonna be like a lot more reliable to get this off by discarding it. We've got the Walking Dead, which, hey, you know, Walking Dead just ended, but anyways, ADHD there. You know, getting this card down for free seems all right. And then we've got classics like the High Priestess Checklick, as well as the Suffocating Shadows. Just going over like all these discard payoffs now, I feel like discard Warlock is almost there with like that density of payoffs for it to be worth going discard, but it might be one or two off. If these cards like aren't good this expansion, I feel like later this year we will definitely get some more discard payoffs, and they will probably be busted, and we'll be complaining about them for sure. And while on the topic of, you know, aggressive decks that may or may not work in the new expansion, next up I have for you a Enrage Fire Warrior. Now, Enrage Warrior I feel like was one of the unfortunately biggest failures of the Murder Castle Nathria expansion. It just never seemed to get there, and I think in this expansion Blizzard's trying to push it a bit harder with some of these new fire spells. And will it get there? I'm not really sure. The Sun Fury Champion is basically like the new, you know, risky skipper card that gives you like a little whirlwind effect to damage minions, which is really good with the Anima Extractor. And then also the new payoff card, the Light of the Phoenix, which is finally some Enraged Warrior card draw, which gets discounted for every damaged character. And then you've got stuff like the Sunfire Smithing to give you like a nice weapon, as well as like some hand buffing. And then you've got the new legendary Thor Belor, which I just really like to say, but it's this really cool like rush recursion minion. So like even if your opponent like clears off your board, you can recur this minion if you have it down by just playing some fire spells, which, you know, the fire spells seem all right, but at the same time I've been burned by this archetype so many times that I'm afraid to open my heart up to it. But Enraged Warrior is definitely the thing to be playing if you want to do warrior stuff this expansion. It seems like it's definitely getting some love, and hopefully it will be enough, but well, I guess we'll find out in a few days. Now, if you want something a bit more tried and true, this next deck will be for you, and that is Spell Relic Demon Hunter. The new Soul Eater Scythe is creating like this new sort of spell archetype for Demon Hunter, where you can run like 3 minions, and then you could still have access to like these cards that benefit from you just running spells in your deck. So those are cards like Deal with the Devil, the Feldori Warband, as well as the Mark of Scorn. And these cards actually felt like really good in theory crafting. The Deal with the Devil, really obnoxious against like board-based decks. It's going to be so annoying if you're playing aggro, by the way. And I know like we're missing out on cards like School Teacher and Scorpid, but I think that this deck can still go the distance with the like all spell build. It may like look a little odd on its surface, but I feel like this is going to be pretty decent when the expansion drops. Now, last but certainly not least, I have for you a Token Shaman deck, which I didn't get to play in theory crafting, but I'm so excited to play this day one. Shaman's basically getting like this like death rattle token synergy stuff where you have like a bunch of spells that put death rattles on minions, so it benefits you to go wide. And to go wide, we run some of the, like the new undead stuff like the Foul Egg, which you've seen in a couple lists already, but also the Hawkstrider Rancher, which I think is low-key a very nutty card in this list. And I know we don't have Bloodlust here, but I feel like because of this card, we might want to find a way to get Bloodlust in. But either way, I think you'll still have an easy time closing out games due to the Shadow Suffusion. And then we've also got the Rock Gill. And like this card just hurts my head thinking about how it works, especially like if you can get the Death Rattle on the Scourge Troll, which this card seems pretty nutty. You know, 1 mana, 1/3 is usually pretty good. And this basically gets just extra value from like every death rattle you put on it. Just really sweet card. I'm really excited to mess around with this. So again, I didn't get to play this in theory crafting, but oh my goodness, I'm so excited to play this day one. It looks like just like such a fun time. So there you have it. 11 superior decks that you can play day one of March of the Lich King. Let me know down in the comments which you'll be jamming day one. And if you made it this far, make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, because if you made it this far, you're probably digging something I'm doing here. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching. I feel like I'm a little hoarse. I've been getting over a cold right now, but I'm doing well. Excited to just jam games day one. And I guess in the meantime, stay superior, and I'll catch you on the next one. Later. Dirt.